Hi, my name is Emma Pettibone, and I'm going to be giving a presentation about immigration and the impact it has on our education system or us as educators. I'm going to go ahead and present my screen so that I can show you my presentation. Oops. Going to go ahead and get it in the full present mode. Okay. All right, so like I said, I'm going to give a presentation on immigration and the educational impact. I was lucky enough to be in a class this semester that helped me learn a little bit about a lot of topics when it comes to cultural diversity in the U.S. and in our school systems. And then I chose to really learn a lot about immigration, so I did a project regarding that. We're going to talk about a couple different things. We're going to talk about immigration in the media, the myths associated with immigration, the reality of immigration, the impact it has on students, and then some strategies that can help you as teachers. So I think watching for the project, I got to watch two different shows, and actually read a book about different immigration situations. And I think having that exposure really helped me to fully grasp the situation of immigration in the U.S. and in other countries. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about the three different media sources that I used. So Refugee is a book by Alan Gratz. It's a really cool book because it's about at a fourth grade level, so it connects to a younger audience. It's a great book that you could read in your classroom that could be really beneficial for your students who might be immigrants or have parents who are immigrants. This book really highlighted that immigration has been going on for centuries, and it's something that all countries have kind of been working through and dealing with. It shows three different situations. It shows a boy who is trying to immigrate out of Germany during World War II. It shows a young girl who's trying to immigrate out of Cuba in the 90s, and it shows a boy who's trying to immigrate out of Iran, that's in about a few years ago from today. This book really highlights and shows the hardship of seeking refugees in countries all over the world. So it's not just the U.S. that has trouble with immigration and not knowing what to do. It seems like it's something that the whole world is trying to deal with and trying to figure out what the right answer is for that. The next media source that I watched was called Party of Five. Party of Five is a show on Freeform. It is nonfiction, but it's based on real events. Sorry, it is fiction, but it's based on real events. It portrays a current family who gets separated when the parents are deported back to Mexico. It's a family of 5 kids that range from the age of 23 to 6 months. It shows the effects of separating families due to deportation and what can happen to different families. It really highlights the inequalities of how the U.S. treats immigrants, and it reflects current families in these same situations. So it really did a good job of showing the audience what could be happening to different families around our country. And then the last media source that I watched was Living Undocumented on Netflix. It's a new series on Netflix, and that was really powerful. It portrays families in real situations of immigrants. So all of these people that it showed are living undocumented, and they really did take a risk by being filmed, but it showed the reality of how harsh the U.S. is to immigrants and what their life is like. I think it was really important because it told the real story of these families, and most of these immigrants are leaving for safety and a better life. And even though when they come here, they're working jobs that are hard and harsh, and they don't live in the best conditions, all of those things are better than where they came from in their home countries. So they choose to stay and live in fear, even though it's rough, because it's better than where they came from. So the big takeaways that I had from the media is that all three of these media sources, their main goal was to break down the stereotypes associated with immigrants. And it really showed the people watching all of the different reasons that someone might immigrate to another country. Most people that were portrayed in these stories were immigrating for safety. They were not leaving just because they wanted to. Most people didn't have a choice, that they were in dangerous situations and they were advised to leave, or they might be killed, or their families might be killed. So it was really powerful to see how many people are just doing what's best for their families and themselves, trying to stay alive. Overall, it really did also show that how big of an effect it does have on families and children. It really can have a pretty powerful impact on children, and we need to be mindful of that as educators. And then another big thing that I talked about more so in Party of Five and in Living Undocumented is that how much the immigration policies have changed and been impactful since President Trump has been in office. So how much just one person or a party can really have an effect on immigration and the policies. And unfortunately, it's been pretty detrimental for a lot of immigrants and their families. So the myths section of this presentation, part of the project was really talking to different family members and friends to find myths that exist in immigration. I don't think I found a lot of myths necessarily, but I think that there was really a lot of common themes that I do think are important to talk about. People who are not directly, I think, affected by immigration don't want to say the wrong thing. And I found that with every person I interviewed 4 different people. 3 were family members, 1 was a good friend, and they all said they didn't want to say the wrong thing and that they don't know what the answer is to for immigrants, but they did all agree that the U.S. is pretty harsh on immigrants. Each of these people that I interviewed had different experiences that linked them to immigrants, but they had nothing but good things to say about these individuals, and they all agreed that they have a positive impact on our society and that we need them to make our society run. I thought a really important part of this was that each person that I interviewed had also read a book based on a true story or watched a documentary on someone who had immigrated to the U.S., and it raised a lot of awareness and empathy for each of these people, for immigrants who are coming to America. Because I think we all ask ourselves, if we were in these situations, we would do the same thing for our families and for ourselves. And so I think that those media sources that I mentioned and similar ones like that are super important, because it really does expose how hard the U.S. is making it to become a citizen. And we all ask the question, why is it so hard to become a citizen of the U.S.? So I thought that was a really great themes that just the 4 people that I interviewed, while they might not be immigrants or directly related to any immigrants, they did feel like they deserve better treatment in the U.S., but they're not sure how to solve the problem or the argument that everyone does argue over with immigration. So our next kind of let's skip the slide. Sorry, this is skipping a slide. I don't know why it's not presenting this one. So let's see if it'll present this one. Okay, sorry about that, technical difficulties. So the next part of this presentation is, and what my project was interviewing people who are immigrants or who are directly impacted by immigration. So I interviewed 2 family or friends of friends, friends of family that I'm not closely related or direct or friends with, and then I also watched an interview that was done by Selena Gomez of children who have DACA status. So the interview by Selena Gomez, I thought it was really impactful because it's children of immigrants who were born in other countries and their parents chose to come over to the U.S. Each of these kiddos has DACA status that started in 2012 by President Obama, but which basically just gives them the ability to be in the U.S., And then they can have visas and they can apply for those visas every couple of years. So it kind of helps them not be deported, but they don't get citizenship through this. And even though they have this, these 3 teens who were really being interviewed talk about how much they still live in fear for themselves and their family. Just because they have DACA doesn't mean that their family can't get deported, and doesn't really necessarily mean that they can't. It helps them not get deported, but if something were to happen, if they were to commit a crime or a situation would happen, and they could still get themselves deported. And I thought it was really powerful to hear the teenagers talk about, like, yes, they're lucky that they have DACA status and they have a social security number and they can get a job, or certain jobs. They can't get all jobs, but they don't also feel like they can live a regular life like the teenagers that they've been raised with. They lived here their whole life and they have friends who can do certain things. They can't do those things. They have to be on their best behavior. They can't take the chance of getting in trouble or doing something that might bring attention to their family. Because if someone found out that their parents are not legal, then I think that they get really fearful that then they could be deported. Another thing they talked about is how they can't travel outside the country, so they can't see any family who's not in the country, and that's just a typical thing that teenagers want to do. Typically is that they want to travel, and that's something that they feel like that's something they can't do. They are not allowed to leave the country. And then they also don't feel safe necessarily in this country that they lived in their whole life. I mean, this is their home. This is where they've been raised, but they've been to school here. They have the same education, but they just don't necessarily feel safe here. And I thought that was really powerful and kind of sad situation for them. Megan is the next person that I interviewed, and she is an immigrant from Canada who's here on a work visa. Even though she's here legally, she still lives in fear of being deported at all times, and getting a work visa is getting harder and harder. So she's lucky that she can be here and has a work visa. And she's lucky because this is where she wants to do her job. So Canada doesn't have the same work opportunities for the fashion industry, which is what she's in. And so being in New York or LA is where she needs to be able to be in the fashion industry. So working here is kind of important to her if she wants to live, follow her dreams. But getting a work visa gets harder each time. And companies have to do a lot to keep her on, and she always feels bad asking them, and it makes it harder to find a job. And then she also mentioned that she's pretty scared to travel. She's had different experiences at customs that some people make it really hard, and some people sometimes it's not like anyone else, but it does make her scared to travel and leave the country to go home, because sometimes she's afraid that she won't be let back in. And then the last person I interviewed is Susie, who's a child of a parent immigrant. I think Susie's situation is really important to listen to and that I got to experience, because I think these are a lot of kiddos that we might have in our classroom that we're unaware of. So in her experience, her parents immigrated here before she was born. So she was born here, and she realizes how lucky she is that she was born in the U.S. and how much freedom that gives her that other kiddos who parents brought them with them when they immigrated don't have that. She has seen family members that have been deported and separated from families. So that's been pretty traumatic for her to watch her family members go through that. And then she also had to grow up pretty fast as a high schooler when her parents were going to seek citizenship, but they were unsure if they would get it, and they might have to leave the country in order to get it. So they might be deported in the process. And so they told her she needs to, in high school, take care of her younger brother, take care of the house, and basically become an adult if that were to happen. And luckily it didn't, but that made her kind of realize the severity of the situation. And she had to grow up pretty fast, kind of knowing that could happen until her parents got her papers, which they eventually did, which is awesome. So yeah, those are 3 experiences I think that they really helped me understand how I can better serve my kiddos and be more aware of their situations if I have any kiddos of immigrants or who have immigrated themselves. So when we look at that, what are the overall things that impact our students? So students who are immigrants or have parents who are immigrants live in fear that they might get deported or separated from the parents. So that's a constant fear that's in their life. And that fear comes out in different ways. They might have reactions that are bigger. They might not be able to focus on their homework because they're fearful, or their schoolwork or tests, or other things, because that's a fear that they are constantly living. We also have to think about trauma from past experiences. So if it is a child who has immigrated with their family, they might have trauma from their home country or just even the immigration process. So we need to be really aware of the trauma that could be there and how that comes out in their schooling. Also, something to consider is that even though these families are in the US and they do have more opportunities now, often they still have very little because they can't get good paying jobs necessarily, and they can't get Social Security numbers that will get them good jobs. They're kind of living in rough situations because they're living under the radar, which typically means that they don't have a lot. And so it's important to know that, and that what we're doing and giving them the resources so that these students can be successful while they're at school. And then really thinking about students who might have been separated from their parents because of their parents were immigrants and they're undocumented, and maybe they were born here, so they don't have that, or they have DACA status. If they've been separated from their parents or taken out of their home, they're really living in a whole new reality, and that's something we really need to be aware of. Their parents were who was keeping them safe, and that's gone, and that's a really big traumatic thing for a kiddo to go through. If we're talking about older kids, they might have to get a job to support siblings or themselves. They might be on their own completely at this point. They might have to go live with a relative or someone they don't know, or a relative that they don't know, or worse, they could end up in foster care, and that could be really, really traumatic for them. And then they might have to take care of younger siblings at night, so they might not have time for studying or homework. So there's a whole new added level. They have to grow up really fast and almost sometimes become parents, sometimes become adults, because they have to take care of themselves or become the adult in the family. And so I think it's really important to remember that when we're working with our kids who might have been separated from their parents, really adjusting our expectations for them while they go through this time. So on that note, what are some strategies that we can help for immigration students in the classroom? I think a big part of that is just creating a welcoming and safe environment in the classroom, knowing that they feel safe and welcome, which is not necessarily the same attitude the US puts out for immigrants. So if we can change that for students in the classroom, a place where they can feel safe and not worried, is super important for them to be able to be successful in the classroom. I think it's very important that we understand what life is like at home. If we have a better idea of what's going on in the house, then we can adjust our expectations for students coping with trauma or home life or new changes in their life. So if we don't take the time to adjust, get to know what's going on in their house, and then adjust our expectations for students who might have to work at night to support their families, or might be taking care of their siblings so another sibling can go work. Or they just don't have anyone at home that can help them. So it's really important that we are aware of those and can adjust what we're asking them to do at school and when they're at home. We also can create instruction that highlights immigrants and their experiences. This is really powerful for children who have immigrated themselves, because they can see a situation like their own in their curriculum. But I also think it's super important for kids who maybe have parents who are immigrants, because they can learn about their situation and maybe hear about different perspectives, and help them understand their situation and their family situation a little bit better. Another way that we can really help these students is if a student doesn't speak English, speaking to them in their native language, or finding someone who can be a really great way to make sure they feel safe and welcome in the classroom. Imagine being in another country, trying to go to school, you don't speak any English, or you don't speak any of the native language, and and you're being asked to complete assignments. I mean, feeling how overwhelming that is after everything they've already been through. We really need to make sure that we're finding someone who can help them and explain what they need to be doing, or how we can help them in that way. And then the last thing that we can really do is, or one other thing we can do is seeing if the student wants to talk about their situation. Not all students are going to want to, but I think there will be students who want to talk about it and maybe want to even share with the class what they've gone through or what their experiences are having parents who are immigrants or even themselves immigrating. It can be a really powerful moment for them to be able to own their story and own their situation, but it can also be really great for the rest of the kids in your class to have some empathy and some understanding of what immigrants go through. So that is pretty much all I have. A lot of the strategies I got was from the book Diversity Matters, Understanding Diversity in Schools. It's a great book if you want to check it out. The 3 different media sources are linked here, so you can always find those 3 if you're interested in watching those media sources as well. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something.